One of the most important aspects of Jonas' thesis is the new importance of knowledge. This is the beginning of section 3. It follows that the knowledge that is required, besides the moral will, to assure the morality of action, fitted these limited terms. And he's just described the limited terms of human action and morality in the pre-modern period. To assure the morality of action fitted these limited terms. It was not the knowledge of the scientist or the expert, but knowledge of kind ready and available to all men of goodwill. It was the kind of knowledge, and really here we're talking about knowledge of the effects of one's actions. The kind of knowledge required was fairly limited, and it was the kind of thing that the average person could easily handle. But the idea of the thesis is that we are beyond that. That is, the knowledge that we need to have to act responsibly has changed immensely. And he's not talking about the everyday actions that we still engage in. He's talking about big questions, essentially questions of public policy, questions of the implementation, large-scale implementation of technologies. Uh, let's see. As he says, all this is decisively changed. Modern technologies, at the beginning of section 4, has introduced actions of such novel scale, objects, and consequences that the framework of former ethics can no longer contain them. What he's saying is that the power of our technology is such that to act responsibly, we're going to need to have a much, much more developed sense of the implications of our technology, of the results of our technological action, you might say. The first has to do, obviously, with the world, with nature itself. Right? He says, take, for instance, as the first major change in the inherited picture, the critical vulnerability of nature to man's technological intervention, unsuspected before it began to show itself in damage already done. He doesn't know anything about global warming in 1973. He's just thinking about huge impacts we're having on nature as a whole. But think of it as applied to global warming. I mean, no one, except for a few thinkers back in the late 19th century, had any idea about our ability to actually change climate. It was actually floated, the idea, in the 19th century by Alfred Wallace, I think his name was Alfred Wallace, the co-discoverer of natural selection along with Darwin, who figured out that if you change the the atmosphere and you add more greenhouse gases, that you will warm it up. I mean, so the basic thesis was there, but it wasn't really something that people thought was possible. That is, most people, that we could actually change the climate. But it's happened. It happened before we became, as a species, really very much aware of what had happened. So the first change is that we have to take responsibility for all of nature. And this is the idea that the idea of the city, the place where morality counts, is no longer carefully circumscribed. That is, that the whole world is the city now because the whole world can be affected by our actions. So the first change, of course, is that the place where ethics matters is everywhere now. The other, of course, difference is not spatial, it's temporal. That is, now we understand that the kind of impacts that we're having will affect the way that human beings live for the rest of the life of the species. So the change is both spatial, the whole world is the place where there is a moral quality to things, and temporal in the sense that the kind of impacts that we're having will be all but permanent. So, as he says, knowledge, here at the bottom of the page, under these circumstances becomes a prime duty beyond anything claimed for it heretofore. That is, we have to be able to anticipate the results of our actions. And the knowledge must be commensurate with the causal scale of our action. That is, we have to have knowledge that is actually proportionate to the power of our technology. And here's the important thing, the most important thing, I think. He says the fact that it cannot really be thus commensurate, that is, that the predictive knowledge falls behind the technical knowledge, which nourishes our power to act, itself assumes ethical importance. That is, we are aware that our ability to anticipate accurately the effects of our actions is inadequate, and that has immediate implications for our actions, and really indicates, there's a big part of the rest of the essay, that we have to be humble and we have to be careful and to act responsibly if we feel that we cannot anticipate the impacts into the future of a new technology. We have to be willing to forego it. That is, we have to be willing to forego that technology because we know that we cannot implement it responsibly. If we go back to the Manhattan Project during World War II and the successful American attempt to develop a nuclear weapon, that would be a prime example. That is, I think many of the scientists who were working on that project knew that what they were doing was wrong, in the sense that they were changing the world in ways that no one could predict by creating a technology that was so powerful. Whether it should have been used in the war, whether it was ever should have been used against human beings, that's another matter. The, the matter I'm talking about is that many of them knew that they probably couldn't do this ethically because they didn't know enough about the impacts of their creation. So, what kind of ethics is actually called for by Jonas is dealt with in the latter part of the essay, and that again is an essay of, or excuse me, is an ethics of carefulness, of humility, of being willing to not do things if we do not know what the ultimate effects of that doing would be.